Hi everybody, Laurie here. Just wanted to share a video for you to learn how to do an Instanet Authentesign. So where we start Instanet Authentesign is typically while we're looking for a home and we're searching the Northstar MLS under actives, and then we find a home that perhaps our buyers want to put an offer in. So I'm going to go ahead, and it is working here. I'm going to get into a map. That's typically how I do a search. For when I'm doing videos, I just do fast searches. So let's pick on an area over where my duplex is this time. So we'll pick this one. It's a 4-bedroom, 1-bath. Let's see what that house looks like. I'm going to go ahead and select the MLS number. What you want to do when you're getting into an Instanet Authentesign is be in the listing photo itself. That way, when you are underneath the photo, you can go ahead and just click this symbol. This will bring you straight into Instanet Authentesign. And I'm going to break this instruction up into 2 different segments, but just to remind you, that is the best way to go in. So we're going to go ahead and click that symbol. And it may have to do this pre-flight check. Just let your browser do whatever it needs to do. All right, and here we're going to come into the Instanet Authentesign program. There are times that this program can be boggy. So if you find that you are stuck, just exit out of the program and re-enter it again. And hopefully I didn't just jinx myself there, but just let you know it is not uncommon for this program to get bogged down. So here we are in the Create Transaction screen. One thing I want to tell you before you go any further with me, there's one button on this screen that you really are best advised to use. Matter of fact, if you don't use it, it's going to be very tough for me to help you. And that is this template button. So while the address populated in automatically, and I'm actually going to label this as a practice. That way, just in case, and I don't think it's very likely, but just in case the other listing agent were to get it, they would have a little laugh and they'd call me and say, were you just practicing? And I'd say, yes, I was. But please, please, please do not just go hit create here. You've got to pick a template. Otherwise, you make yourself a ton of work. So this will all fill in because we clicked on the listing itself in the map. But here I want you to go ahead and pick buyer's packet. In this particular Instanet Authentesign practice, we're going to do a buyer's packet. Know that you could simply do this with a listing packet as well. And you might not have all these variations. It's because I do a lot of training. Sometimes I call them other things. But I know you have buyer's packet and listing packet. So just go ahead and select those, or that one. And that is what you need. It will automatically add you as the buyer agent, and all this stuff is going to stay the same. So as long as you've got a template, have I made myself clear? You need the template. And I'm going to show you why in just a few minutes. It's very important we have that template. So I'm going to hit create now. Now it is safe to hit create. And again, it does take some time for this to wind in. So it populates with the street address, and it does say practice, and it's still building in there. Now just note that if I were to add anything at all, like let's just add 2 dots there. If you wanted to change the name again, this check mark now becomes your saving button. And there's really no need to do that. I was just showing that you could. Now when we're in this transaction, we are now what's called the wizard part of the transaction. And you'll notice that we have this right column here, and that's where the wizard is right at the top. If I should close out that hamburger bun just to have more room on my page, that's not a problem. This right hamburger bun is actually very key to making sure you're filing everything and doing everything in this transaction. So if you want to go to forms, go here. If you want to go back to the wizard, go here. If you want to go to documents, go here. If you want to go to contacts, go here. We are going to fill out the wizard, which is going to fill out a lot of that. What I'm trying to nail down for you is do everything out of the right column. Some of us have learned, because we didn't know any better, to start in the left column. And we pulled forms here, and we went to Authentisign here, and we added contacts here. None of those are really filed very well. There is a hamburger bun here. That just simply opens up the names for you to give you the longer version. I don't really want you working in this left column at all. I want you to be right-brained or right-columned, and I'll say that several times throughout this training. Okay, so there are going to be 5 steps within this wizard. It's very important that you know that there's pretty much 2 things to do on the first step, 2 things to do on the second step, and if you have 2 buyers, which is common, then 2 things to do on the third step. The 4th and 5th step are kind of already done for you, nothing much to do. So let's talk about the first step. We are on step 1. We're going to wind down a little bit. This is the same template really that the buyer's agent, or I'm sorry, the listing agent would have used. And so we're going to go and fill in the portion down here where we will add a purchase agreement and our purchase price. So here's the list price, and we're going to go ahead and add a purchase price. And I'm going to be stepping over to grab my charger while I'm doing this, so just one moment. Okay, so that will help me keep the battery charged for the training, and I will attempt to edit this out later. All right. All right, thanks for being patient with that. All right, so we want to fill in our purchase price and our earnest money price. That's going to be the first 2 things we do in step 1. So given this house was listed at $269,900, we're going to go ahead and offer $269,900. And that's just, we're fictitiously putting this together. All right, and then we also have the earnest money, which typically is 1%. So we'll just go for easy math. We'll say $2,700. Okay. So there's our first 2 things on step 1. Now we will click next. For when I was beginning to do this, I actually did this wrong. And I would go down here and I'd see, oh, save and exit. I must have to do that. That was actually not correct. I want to stay in the wizard. So just stay right in here and hit next. Now, if you had done it accidentally, it would be no big deal. You could just go back to the wizard again, just to let you know. All right, so within step 2, there's going to be 2 steps to step 2. So, or 2 things to do in step 2. So we will have an offer date and we will have a closing date. Now, there are some other dates in here, including possession date. This will automatically get filled in when we put in our closing date. But I don't necessarily want to offer voluntarily the mortgage dates and such. I usually just go with an offer date because that is required. So let's pretend it's today, April 18th, and I will put in a closing date. And that's what I want you to do. So there we go, and it automatically pre-populated. Don't stress about the time unless you want a specific time, which I don't generally write that on the purchase agreement. Again, do not save and exit. Instead, we're going to go up to next. So here are the primary agents within the deal and their brokers. So we would leave those. This would be hypothetically myself and Classic Realty, and then Michael Olson and Premier Realty. We just leave that where it is, and it's important to have them in here. We don't want to take them out because we might want to email agreements to these people later. So what we are going to do is add our buyers here. You can hit the plus button, and that will take you to the buyers. You can create the new transaction contact, or if you already have them, you can add them as an existing contact. I want to show you what adding a new transaction contact looks like. You'll go to type and add buyer, and then typically I'll say like Sally Seashell, something funny. And so we'll just pretend that is her name, and then you would put your own email. So this is because we're doing a practice. So be the person that it's going to send to. And when you have Sally Seashell, just in case you're wondering what kind of offer came to you, you'll remember that's your fictitious buyer. If you want to put Bob the Builder, put Bob the Builder. Okay, so then if you want to also add their addresses, like where they're currently living and their phone number, you may do that if you wish, but really the most important piece in here is their first name, last name, and their email. Now, if they do have a special kind of name, like, I'll just throw out my husband there, I call him Al Knudson, but that's not actually his legal name. I would probably put Al and Knudson here, but his legal name is Edward Allen Knudson. And his preferred signature, he's just the prime example here, he signs it E. Allen Knudson, and then he puts his certain initials. So I would probably put all those in just as he would like to sign it, just to make it auto-populate correctly later when we go to sign. If you don't know their full tricky names, if they're not really specific about it, if it's just Ann Smith or Sally Seashell, just put it in as you know it. The title company will take care of exact signatures later. If you ever want to see a video about this screen, there is a video box right there that will tell you videos or tutorials only about this screen. It's kind of nice. So let's hit save and add Sally Seashell, and there she is. So that when I said you could do 2 things on step 1, 2 things on step 2, 2 things on step 3, well, that's assuming you might have 2 buyers. Let's, in this case, actually say Sally's the only buyer, just to save some time. So we're going to hit next, and now we are in step 4. And this was the reason why I didn't want you to just hit create right away when it went to create a transaction. That blue button, I said, don't hit that yet. You needed to add the certain template. And here's where the template pays off for you. All the forms are in here that you probably are going to need that our broker has already loaded for you, including the KW specific addendums. So they are going to be up here as you need them. Here's the KW Classic Disclosure Form, and then our compensation form. Now, if you don't want them in that order, you can certainly put purchase agreement up here higher. It's totally up to you. I see no problem with that. And if you wanted to put the HUD disclosure form, grab it by the picture there and move it on up. If you grab it here, it's going to open up the form. So I would grab it more to the left. And then, you know, I might even put the personal property addendum up a little higher as well. I don't typically use earnest money. I use trust funds. So as you need them, you know, there they are. The counteroffer addendum is a little higher too, so you might want to move that down. But it's fine. And if you don't use them, you don't have to delete them. Here's the counteroffer one. You don't have to delete them, just leave them where they are. And so that's just reviewing the forms. We're still leaving the wizard yet, so we're going to hit next. And then there's the documents. We don't know how to get back or get rid of the fax back cover sheet, so just leave it there. Complete the wizard by hitting done. You will want to add to your documents later through the right column. I'd just like to be done with the wizard. Now, what would we add to the documents? Just saying, probably the disclosure form, which is found in the supplements here. So I'm going to be having this open. Let's see, offer packet, owner occupied form. I'm not really sure what all that is. So perhaps it's a foreclosure property. I don't really know this at all. I've just arbitrarily picked it. So I'm just going to grab it and open it up and see what we have. And I'm going to assume it's got some disclosures in it of some type. So it is going to be some kind of an offer summary that the listing agent does want put in here. So it does look like there is some seller disclosures as well. So this is just where they're doing the transaction. We often do see these in foreclosure or pre-foreclosure properties. Not saying that's what this is at all. It's just having a certain way to get this property done. This is how this loan or this particular agent is running it. That's fine. We're going to accept it. No problem. So what I'm going to do is do a save. Yes, I am. I actually don't know where the save button is here all of a sudden. Don't know what happened. Why is that happening? Find on page. Don't know. share. I feel like my settings got messed up a little bit. I don't know what's going on. So I right-clicked on the document, and then it pulled up the Save As. So we're going to go ahead and Save As. I haven't used this browser in a little bit, so that's probably why. And I'm just going to save that in my desktop, and you'll get a kick out of this, guys. Sometimes I just pick a crazy letter, and I'll call it that just to find it easier. Okay, so we'll save it that. And I will let that be. I will go back into my document. So here's my transaction. And then again, I could go into documents here, or I could go into documents here, but I'm going to use the right column, and I'm going to load up that document to have as part of the transaction. So here's a fun way to do that. Now, by the way, if you were in Chrome, it's even cooler, and I just didn't have Chrome open just now. My video was having trouble in Chrome. So but add the plus sign, add new document. If you were in Chrome, you would find it hidden down here on the left where you had opened up the document, and you could just drag and drop it here. That's exactly what it says, is drag and drop. Or you can click to upload. So I happen to know I'd be able to do that even though I'm not in Chrome. I'm going to go to desktop, and I'm going to find that crazy letter U, and there it is. So loading that in here. Now, once I have it in here, I can certainly rename it, not a problem. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to call it seller, I'm kind of picky about that, disclosure packet, just what he named it. All right, or he or she. All right, so that brought in a document that might be needed. Now we're going to just basically, we can look at the dashboard and see everything that we brought in. The next real thing to do is go to forms and start filling them out. And so this is the Instanet Authentesign part. So what we're going to do is just a couple of forms here. This particular lesson isn't to teach you about all the forms. Gail Hazley in our office is your forms broker, and he's the person who would tell you what to put on forms and what forms would you need. But just for the sake of giving you a little bit of instruction here, we could do a buyer representation contract and an agency contract. And we could also just do a quick purchase agreement. So I think what would be most helpful for you is if I did a buyer representation contract. So I'm going to start by filling that out, clicking the name of it. Now I can start filling in the date of the contract. And so there's that date. And then other things are filled out. This would be as if there was two people, you'd put the and then there'd be another person there. In this case, it is just Sally. So then now we're going to decide the contract dates, start dates. And we could have filled this out in the wizard. I just generally fill it out in the contract. So let's say we're starting the contract today, and we're going to go through, we're going to put 6 months out. So I'm just going to kind of guess where that is. I'm thinking it's right about here. Oh, it's probably a little far. So we'll go to the 18th. Here we go. Now, everybody fills out their buyer contract their own way. I'm not here to tell you the exact way to do it. Again, please see Gail for any questions you have on how to fill out the contract. My mission here is to show you how to use Instanet Authentesign. All right, so I typically do put 0 here. I check the contract or the MLS data to make sure it pays 2.7. I didn't actually do that, and I could do that real briefly. It doesn't have to pay 2.7. Oh, there it is, 2.5. I don't know if you saw that. I went kind of quick. There it is, 2.5. All right, so we'll adjust that. All right. And I usually put a 0 there. I put 180 days there, and I put 0 here. I say shall reduce the obligation of the buyer because it's going to be collected from the seller. And that might have been part of the forms there. It's Keller Williams Premier, so I'm assuming it's all standard real estate transactions there. Redfin is coming out with different things, so you'll have to read that more carefully. I would go over with my buyer if they wish me to coordinate the closing or not. I do that during the buyer consult. So I'm going to click that. And generally, I have people agree to dual agency, but again, you'll go over that with your buyer in the buyer consult. and then there's the signature page, and then there's the fraud page for wire fraud. So we're going to do a save. Now you don't always have to do a save. Mine actually auto saves, but I sometimes just in the habit of showing it. Agency won't really have anything to fill out, so I'm not going to fill out that part. I can fill out a quick purchase agreement just for those of you who are kind of new and want to see me do a purchase agreement, but I probably won't fill out any additional forms for this tutorial. So we'll load this up, and you'll notice that much of the purchase agreement's already going to be filled out, to be quite honest, and that's why I can usually write with this, and I can write a total agreement if I know all the terms fairly quickly, like 10 or 15 minutes. So all that is filled in there. Here's your built-ins. Remember, refrigerators and stoves generally in the kitchen are not built-ins. This is talking about the built-ins by maybe a family room refrigerator or something like that. So we're going to keep on going down. So with this purchase agreement, we're going to pretend that they're going 20% cash, 80% financing, and then we have our closing date here. And just to let you know, typically we have our closing date more towards the end of the month, so I'm going to say the 28th, and I don't even know exactly if that puts it on a Friday or Saturday, but I'm just going to, actually it wouldn't be April, it would be closer to, like, say May. That would be actually a pretty quick closing, but we're going to just so hypothetical it. We typically want 45 to 60 days for closing, FYI. Okay, so mortgage agreement typically is subject, or this agreement is subject to a mortgage financing addendum. It typically is a first mortgage. It typically does not include any grant program, so I'm going to not do that. And then I'm pretty much doing conventional, writing this up theoretically. All right, and then we have a 30-year mortgage. You can see I can skip all these other things because it doesn't apply. Interest rates are really great right now, so we'll protect them up to 4.5%. I want to always check, if I can, that money would be refunded to the buyer if it doesn't work out, because I'm representing the buyer. I like to encourage my people to lock within 5 business days, but they should talk about that with their lender. If it had lender commitment work orders, we could say that we would cover, that the seller would cover up to $200 if the home is in really good shape. That's a good number to put in there. Again, agents throughout this office, you're all going to have your own number to put in there, and I totally understand that. This is really based for new agents, this training. New agents, if you find a home that's in a little bit rougher condition, feel free to put up more in there. You could put 400, you could put 500. 200 to 250 is pretty standard for me. Depending on the competitiveness of the market, I might want the seller to pay for any re-inspection that the buyer has to have based on their appraisal. And then here's the FHA escape clause. So you would write that in there. As if you had an FHA loan, you'd put the loan amount in there, or the purchase price in there, your choice. Line 141, again, that's FHA DVA financing only, so I'm conventional, I'm not going to fill that out. Same here, that's DVA. Part of my plan here actually was to go conventional. It's a little quicker. Okay, so now we're going to talk about contributions to buyer closing costs. I'm going to be competitive in the marketplace. It is April right now, so I'm going to say that we're not asking seller to contribute. So then that is all I need to fill out. If you were asking seller to contribute, you'd put a yes, and you'd put probably a percentage, 3 or 3.5%. 3 would be real good. And then I would caution you to talk to your buyer about how they want to handle that in a competitive market situation. So the reason I'm going to just discuss this real quick is it is coming up right now in April that we're writing offers and they're increasing the price so that it covers it for the seller. So if they do pay the buyer closing costs on the seller does that, you're compensating the seller in price. Well, the problem with that is you increase the price of the house and it may not appraise. And so there's that to watch for. So in this case, I'm going to keep it simple and take that out and say it is not contributing. Typically, we do elect to have a home inspection, and it typically is contingent upon that home inspection, and we typically do not do intrusive testing. All right. Typically, we get ours done within 10 to 14 days, just to wrap that up, including all of the negotiations behind that. And I love to say my people can buy that house without selling. Obviously, there's oftentimes that they do have to sell. But in this case, we're going to keep it simple and say that the buyer has 20% down and they don't have to sell their home in order to buy this next one, or maybe they're a renter with a lot of cash. Typically, we prorate taxes, and typically, if there are any non-homestead tax portions, we ask the seller to pay that because that's not the buyer's fault. The rest of these are very typical that they're going to be seller shall pay, seller shall pay. These are the back taxes, the assessments, and things like that the seller really should clear up, in my opinion. And we want them to agree that they've not had any notice regarding any new improvements. Otherwise, they should tell us. We would love to say and hope that this is not subject to a cancellation of previous agreement. So we do fill some things out here in a positive attitude, hoping that this is the case, and then they have to tell us if it's different. We do hope for a warranty deed. That's what we would like, so we put what we would like. We do, of course, want to have immediate closing or immediate possession after closing because there's risks if the seller remains. So all of this is pretty much boilerplate. I'm not going to fill it out. We'll say that they have a full disclosure. There we go. And we'll say that it's hooked up to city water and sewer, so does not know of a subsurface sewage treatment system, does not know of any wells, and is not subject to any contingencies or inspections for those, basically the addendums. We can say that the buyer is going to pass on a home warranty. Typically, though, I do ask for home warranties, so do ask me about that if you ever have questions. It's up to you if you want to have the buyer pay for it or the seller pay for it. And typically, I put up to about $500 in line 390. So you have your own preferences that you'll develop. So here is the listing agent. So we're going to say seller's agent, and buyer's agent over here is myself. Remember, if that was an in-office deal, we would be checking dual agency. And again, this dual agency does not apply. If it was in office, it would, and then we'd need signatures. In this case, we don't need signatures because it does not apply. And it's talking about electronic signatures are good. I usually do attach an addendum. I usually do, sometimes it's subject to the sale of the buyer's property. Sometimes it's got a lead-based paint on it. So, but that's the only one I'm going to use for here. And of course, mine ends up being a personal property agreement to write in the refrigerator, the stove, the washer, and the dryer. I like to check that it is not a foreign person unless I know otherwise, so that I would read everything over more carefully had I not been doing this just as a hypothetical. Possibly reaching out to the listing agent and asking, is your seller a FERPTA situation at all? So then I exit. Now, if I didn't want to go down here and exit, just so you know, I could skip over to transaction forms and get to the next form quickly this way. Here is the personal property agreement. So I'll go ahead and do that. It's kind of a nice little skip the step where you don't have to hit exit. So we would list the seller's name, which we would be able to find on the disclosure. And then we could go ahead and pop a clause in here. And I do like to talk about clauses. I have a personal clause in here. It's called, let's see, standard inclusions of personal property. You'll see I have a couple other ones too. You'll have to ask me about them if you're curious about that. But I just have seller, it pops it in already written. Seller agrees to live the refrigerator and stove, washer, and dryer as seen on the property during the showing of, and I haven't updated that to say the right date, but we could say that we saw it today, like such. And then there's the purchase agreement date and the street address, and then we'd have Sally sign. So I will go ahead, and again, I'm just kind of randomly hitting save, although I know it auto saves, and we will exit. Let's pretend that those are the agreements that I want to go ahead and have for my purchase agreement. I know there's more, but for the sake of this this video, this tutorial, we're going to go with that. But to be sure, you will have a buyer's checklist and a seller's or listing checklist, and they're all kind of in here. So just go down. Of course, you're going to need the HUD home inspection. You're going to need the KW disclosure form. Go down and see what you need. You're going to need the compensation disclosure. We already did that one. You're going to need the arbitration. You may or may not need the earnest. Just leave it in there if you don't, but hit it if you do and make changes. You won't need an amendment until things are signed, and then you want to make changes. There's, in case it has a septic, there's that. In case you want to do addendum for the lead-based paint, here's that one. So pick and choose the ones that you want. Most of them are here, so there's no need to worry. They're going to be in front of you. If for some reason you don't have it, for one, I think it could be radon. You could go get it. Let me just go get radon as a sample. I'll pull up Minnesota area, it's Minnesota Association of Realtors, because they're the ones who write our forms. And I'll just type up in here radon to search, and it'll pop up. I'll click that circle and add it to my basket. Add. Now it's going to be most likely at the bottom right there. And again, if I wanted to move it up, I could. And I could be including that. In this case, I'm going to just be including the forms that I filled out. So that would be like the buyer contract, the agency, the purchase agreement. Sure, I can do for your home protection, get a home inspection, because there's nothing to fill out on it. I could fill out the classic disclosure form and send that. And then the personal property agreement. I'm going to leave it at that. So you would check the other ones that you'd want to use. Now here's the important part. You need to review this with your buyer prior to them signing. So when we send it into a basket here, and I have this term called check, check, check. So get them into the basket, go to the basket, email it, because you're not ready to have them sign it yet. Not really. You've got to email it so they know what they're signing. So put the email together by picking a recipient. I'll pick Sally. You can only pick one. Try not to send it to the other agent, right? I mean, that would be not so smart. So hit select, and it won't happen unless you actually just do it by almost on purpose. Type a little note saying, here's the thing to read. Let's call each other and go over the agreement. You can send it as a link or as an attachment. Doesn't really matter. If you have another buyer in the transaction, click CC, go get the other buyer. They'll be listed in here. Okay, so then hit close if there wasn't, and you're ready to go. You just leave the CC sitting there. And you would hit send. I'm literally going to send it to myself right now. It doesn't matter. It's a practice. It's only me who's going to get it. The listing agent at 5540 Aldine Street isn't going to get this because I didn't check their name. I didn't send it to them on an email. So you can leave this checked or unchecked, but what I would want you to do now is get into your email and go over everything with the buyer and the seller. I'm sorry, just the buyer, about their contract. Make sure they have understanding, read it section by section, confirm their terms. We are going to move on in the next portion of this to show you how I actually do that signing. So I'm going to pull it up on an email and pretend I'm the buyer signing. I'm sorry, let me take that back. What we're going to do is put these into a signing next and show you how I send that off in an Authentisign. I don't think I actually need to show you what it looks like on an email. I guess since I said it, I'll probably start it that way. But our next step after we shared it with an email is to put it into an Authentisign. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, and I'm going to stop the recording. So just look for that next section to be part 2 of Instanet Authentesign. All right, thanks so much.